Good evening, everyone. My name is Jess Mears, and I am the membership manager for the Libertarian Party. I'll be moderating the call this evening. In a few minutes, I'll hand the call over to the Libertarian National Committee Chairman, Nicholas Sarwark, but I would like to share with you the structure of this call now. Due to the hundreds of people that will be on the line, all callers are muted. A large list of questions have already been submitted, and Nick will keep his responses as limited as possible so that way we can get through many of your questions. If you would like to submit a question, you still can do so, and you can respond to the reminder email that I sent to you this afternoon. If you cannot find that email, you can email me at jess.mears@lp.org. Without any delay, I would like to hand the call over to Nick for him to provide you on an outlook on the Libertarian Party in 2019, and then we will get to your questions in a little bit. Hi, Nick.
Hi, Jess. Thank you for organizing this call. Thank you to everyone who has called in to hear about the outlook that we have going into 2019. If in sports they talk about how the championships are won in the off season, and our odd years are kind of like our off season for politics. So we have just come out of an incredible election cycle in 2018. Outside of just the Libertarian Party, almost 50% of the electorate voted in the 2018 midterms, which is an increase from about 36% in 2014. So we just came out of an election when more Americans got involved in a midterm election since any year since 1914. That wave of extra voters upended all predictions we had for what percentages were going to be, for what vote totals were going to be. I know I experienced it as a candidate myself running for mayor here in Phoenix. We had roughly twice as many people vote in that election as historically had ever voted at all. And it made prediction really difficult. So looking back at 2018 just a little bit, we ran 833 candidates for public office in 2018 in the November elections. We ended up with 52 elected Libertarians in 2018. May have another one when Jeff Hewitt's race gets called in Riverside County. And that's an increase from the last general election year, 2016, where we only elected 34 people that year. And what we're trying to do is keep advancing down the field regardless of the other things that are happening in the world or in politics. We have to show up to every election. It doesn't matter whether it's a blue wave or a red wall, if it's presidential, if it's midterm, or if it's the odd years. The Libertarian Party has a lot of ideas for how we can be successful in 2019 and 2020. The first thing is 2019 is an odd year election. So there are a few states that are going to have legislative races. Virginia, New Jersey, and Mississippi are three that I can think of off the top of my head. They have their legislative races in the odd-numbered years, and we're already looking at picking strategic races in those states to apply some of the things that we did in 2018, where we had targeted campaigns, we provided extra assistance and strategic advice to candidates, typically in smaller districts, who were able to significantly outperform historical Libertarian numbers. Probably the best example of that was Bethany Baldes in Wyoming. She ran for a state house race against the incumbent Speaker of the House and did so well that she was actually called as the winner on election night until they found 500 provisional and absentee ballots, and she ended up losing by 63 votes total. So that kind of level of success is something that we're seeing with good race selection and candidates that are getting good data from their communities, from door knocking and polling, to identify what is important to the people in that district, and then tailor that message and their campaigning in order to create a best shot of winning. That program will continue in 2020.
Hi, everyone. This is Jess. I'm going to go in and unmute Nick. Please do not unmute yourself if you are called in digitally. Thank you.
All right, that was exciting.
Sorry about that, Nick.
No problem. It's kind of fun. So we want to continue that program in 2019. One, because there are some things that worked really well and there's some things that didn't work as well. And that odd year election when there are fewer races nationally, just to give you a comparison, in 2016, the Libertarian Party ran 135 candidates. In 2016, we ran 593 candidates around the country, 833 in 2018. 2017 is our last odd-numbered year. We ran 135 candidates for both state and local races, but of those, we ended up electing 48. So we do significantly better in these odd-year elections when the old parties aren't paying as much attention, and it gives us a chance to further hone those skills and strategies so that when we go into 2020, we're ready to have a record-setting number of candidates for a presidential year and have more of them be more successful. The other thing about 2019 is these state and local races provide experience and opportunity for candidates and activists to really get out in their community, to learn how to communicate with their fellow citizens and get those libertarian ideas out there. What I have found in running for office myself and other candidates have told me is there are ideas that libertarians have, things like spending discipline and cutting public spending, stopping any sort of tax increase and actually reducing the overall tax burden, some criminal justice reform ideas like, reducing or eliminating penalties for drugs. These are ideas that aren't just core to what libertarianism is about, this idea that you should be able to live your life how you see fit as long as you don't hurt other people. But they're also ideas that will not be talked about in an election cycle unless libertarians put them out there. And when we do that, when we're seen on a debate stage or in a TV or newspaper interview supporting these ideas and being the only ones talking about some common sense that would make everyone's life better, we gain new supporters, we gain new members, we gain new activists, we gain new volunteers for the next campaigns. We anticipate that in 2019 we'll run significantly more candidates for office than we did in 2017, now that we have an organized candidate recruitment plan that is being spearheaded by Kara Schultz, who did great work in 2018. And that will help build up the farm team of elected libertarians around the country who can then run for higher office in 2020 and beyond, as well as provide more libertarian voices out there in elected office so that our neighbors and our friends are able to see what libertarians govern like when they're elected and become more comfortable voting for us in some of those other races. As far as how we came out of the 2018 election, ballot access-wise, we are on in 34 states for 2020 for a presidential candidate. That is the best situation we have ever been in after a non-presidential general election, and it's actually the best situation that any third party has been in history. We have full ballot access for the first time ever in New York, thanks to Larry Sharp, so we don't have to do a 15,000 signature ballot access drive for our 2020 presidential candidate or our 2022 gubernatorial candidate there. We retained in Oklahoma for another 4 years, which saves us just a ton of money and time and effort. And Oklahoma, as you may well know, was for 16 years the only hole in the map where we didn't have ballot access. So retaining there is amazing. Dan Fishman for auditor retained in Massachusetts, which means we don't have to collect signatures there. In Illinois, we'll be going back to get ballot access for 2020. We do still have to collect signatures. And there are some states where we lost ballot access. States like Arkansas, Iowa, we lost major party status, but we maintained ballot access. So it wasn't all good news from the 2018 election. Like I said at the top of the call, so many people participated that it really threw off our historical numbers. We have, to Some stuff going on at the National Party. We have membership that has not dropped off as significantly as it normally does coming out of our last presidential election, 2016. That's thanks to a lot of effort internally. I have to give a shout out to Jess Mears, our membership manager, for working hard on new and creative ideas to gain membership and stop from losing membership as we typically do after an election. Our birthday is coming up. In just 7 days, the Libertarian Party will turn 47 years old. It's hard to, think of how far we've come and realize that this is a party that hasn't even reached 50 years old. So we're doing some really great stuff. The party financially is in a bit of a budget crunch. We have a balanced budget that we passed for the 2019 year where we're trying to get the finances back to really good health after stretching a lot to do some of this candidate and campaign stuff that we did in 2018. We didn't leave anything on the field in 2018 to try and meet our goals and get our candidates elected to office. And so this is a retrenching year, but we passed a balanced budget and we maintained all of the programs that we had built up. So from media relations with our press secretary to candidate recruitment and campaign support, those programs are all still in place, even though, we've had to cut in some other areas in order to make sure that we're able to live within our means and meet our goals. And there are some other goals that if we have the support of party members like you, we'll be able to add back into the budget later in 2019 once the finances get better. Right now, in a way to try and kickstart 2019, a generous donor has actually put forth a match of $15,000 for an end-of-year money bomb that's going to allow us to go out and put some of these issues into the mainstream in 2019, issues that libertarians have been leading on, so that we can create a conversation around some solutions that libertarians have to problems that our candidates can then build up off of and we can use to recruit new members. That match, we were about 2/3 of the way through as of this morning. We had raised about $10,000 to match that $15,000. If you feel inclined to help us start 2019 strong, if you visit lp.org/moneybomb, you can give and help us earn that match and start 2019 really strong. January is just around the corner. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that plans are already underway for our 2020 National Convention in Austin, Texas. It's going to be May 21st to 25th. I like to say that the Libertarians are going to Austin to keep Austin a little weirder. If you go to libertarianconvention.org, you can bookmark it to get updates. And right now we are offering welcoming committee sponsorships for $1,000. It includes a gold package ticket. Whatever the price ends up being for that ticket, that's included. But what the welcoming committee does is it helps make our convention more accessible for some of our younger activists or newer activists who may be not as financially well off. It's a great way to support getting new people involved in the party and keep our overall ticket packages low so that we can keep having record-setting conventions. When we had the 2016 convention in Orlando, that was a record number of delegates I think we've ever had at a Libertarian National Convention. And then in 2018, as far as fundraising and ticket sales, we broke the records that we had broken in 2016. And so what we're hoping to do with the welcoming committee and some other sponsorship opportunities is have the 2020 convention be the biggest convention in Libertarian Party history. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the party. We are in a very long game, and I was super energized. We had our LNC meeting in Alexandria just 3 days ago, and Saturday night we had a reception at the national office. We are one of only 3 political parties in the country that owns our office, and we are on track to actually pay off the entire mortgage before the balloon comes due, thanks to some prudent budgeting and some strategic thinking that a number of people have done. to, set us up for that success. But we had approximately 100 people in that building, and the energy was palpable. And it was a reminder of why we do this, that we're not alone in trying to fight for freedom, that there are so many people who really care about this country and its future, about setting the world free in our lifetime, and especially in our children's lifetimes. And so while I wasn't as happy as I wanted to be with my election results, and I know a lot of our candidates weren't as happy as they wanted to be with our election results, this is the long game. And we had so many more people vote for us, take that jump to be libertarian with us, to say that they want something different from their politicians and from their government. And we're just going to keep going with that momentum. We're not going to slow down, and we're not going to stop. So I hope that covered most of the stuff. But now, instead of keep going on with what I want to say, I would like to open it up for questions, and those will be asked by Jess Mears.
Okay, everyone, if you have gotten on the call since we first got started, to submit a question, please email it to me. I sent you a reminder this afternoon, so you can just respond to that. We do have a long list of questions, and we'll try to get through as many as possible. The first one for Nick is from Kenya. Kenya said, most people that she knows do not understand what it means to be a libertarian. Can we create a nationwide campaign to define our party? I'd like for us to control the narrative.
Yeah, so I appreciate that question. It is true. Libertarian is something we have to define all the time. In almost every interview I give, I'm asked, tell me what a libertarian is. I usually define it as, anything that's peaceful, which is a really quick way to define it, to, we believe you should pursue your happiness any way you choose as long as you don't hurt other people and don't take their stuff, to, we're the only political party in the country who is working to try and give more power back to individuals to control their own lives and take away power of the government to control your life for you as long as you're not hurting others. But there is a desire on the behalf of the members of the National Committee to come up with some sort of branding campaign, whether it's one that we outsource to somebody developing a campaign or we work on it in-house, for us to be able to go out there and really put our own spin on libertarianism and identify ourselves rather than being defined by others. Especially, for a long time, the major media has identified certain Republicans as libertarian, which is a good sign from the perspective that being a libertarian is so cool that even Republicans want to do it. But it's a little bit disconcerting because if a Republican gets identified as a libertarian and then they do something that is very contradictory to the Libertarian Party's platform and what we actually believe in, we sometimes take some of the blame for that too. So it would be a good idea to define what it means to be a libertarian better. And I think taking that branding and then pushing that out into a campaign to try and attract people who would otherwise walk away from the two old parties, to put a name to their independence, to stand in solidarity with people who believe a lot of the things they believe, rather than just unmooring themselves from the two old parties, but still not feeling like they have a unified voice or that they're working together with others. There's a lot more energy and possibility for change if you're working together with other people who share, 70, 80% of your views, than if you're just one independent writing letters to the editor or doing your own thing.
Thank you, Nick. The next question is from Sven. He is asking, does or will the Libertarian Party have a strategic plan for the next 2 to 3 election cycles? Why or why not?
So we do have a strategic plan for the next 2 election cycles, but it gets fuzzier the farther out you put it. And the reason is elections are dynamic things. They don't occur in a vacuum. Look at the 2016 results where we got, a record number of votes for a Libertarian presidential candidate. We tripled our previous records, and we were running 2 former governors who had been elected as Republicans in overwhelmingly Democratic states. They did really well, partially because they're very good candidates, but partially because the Republicans put up a reality show star and the Democrats put up somebody who was so polarizing as far as how people felt about her, this former Secretary of State that, people hated with a deep and abiding passion, that having 2 former chief executives of states who looked, calm, cool, and collected, they did better because of the contrast. If the other parties had put up different candidates, we maybe should have nominated a different candidate. And that's something that I encourage delegates at the National Convention to always think about, is it's not only who are the candidates that are available to you, but what kind of election environment are they going into? Is it a re-election campaign for president where they're going to be dealing with an incumbent, or is it an open seat? Are the front runners in the other parties really establishment figures, or are they outsiders? Because contrast is the way that you get more votes, by doing something different from what other people do. So the strategic plan is really to keep building on our gains, to keep establishing more and better infrastructure in state and local parties so that we don't slide back, so we don't have an election that pushes us back and makes us go back to the drawing board or have to get things that we already have done. I want to try and make sure that the party just keeps moving from strength to strength by taking strategic risks to get stuff like Oklahoma ballot access in 2016 without extending so far that we put the party into some sort of financial crisis or crunch. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that, but I reevaluate, and I know the other members of the National Committee reevaluate coming out of each election to see what the new opportunities are going to be and what the new challenges are going to be. And that kind of reevaluation is what lets us continue to grow while the 2 old parties are stagnating or even shrinking in voter registration, because they're not able to be as nimble as we are by being a smaller and younger party.
Thank you, Nick. The next question is from Santee. Is the Libertarian Party a good fit for young voters? Why or why not?
Absolutely, the Libertarian Party is a good fit for young voters. And, this bears out looking at the data for Libertarian voters when you break them out by age cohort. If you look at presidential results for Gary Johnson or polling during the last presidential election, or you look at, individual local elections, as the voters are younger, our percentages go up and up and up. There was actually a poll during this 2016 election where, in the 65 and older set, I think Gary Johnson was polling like 3 or 4% total. And this was early on in the election when he was polling, 8, 9, 10, 12% overall. But when you got down to the 18 to 25 cohort, he was polling at 25, 26, 27, 30%. Younger voters identify as libertarians. And the reason it's a good fit is 2 things. One, it's a younger party. It's not dominated by older people. There's a sense of opportunity, a sense that young leaders within the Libertarian Party can become, they can really make a change, whereas in the Republican or Democratic parties, they might have to pay their dues for 20, 30, 40 years before they're given a chance to actually do anything of meaning or import. The other thing is the Libertarian Party doesn't make young people compromise their values. And there's one thing about being young, it's the idea that you cherish authenticity. You cherish this idea of living your values and really being true to them. And what happens if you look at the 2 old parties is young people who don't feel that the government or the law should be involved in other people's personal relationships on issues like marriage equality or, freedom of speech or things like how you express yourself. they are uncomfortable being part of the Republican Party because the Republican Party is not very good on that, and they feel like they're compromising that value they have. Alternatively, young people who are just trying to get a start in the world, pay down student loan debt, and, may want to defend themselves with a firearm, they have to compromise their values to be part of the Democratic Party that is less sensitive to those issues in order to, be a player there. The Libertarian Party is the one that has the least constraint on young people in living out their values, and it has the most opportunity for them to be successful and actually make a change in their community.
The next question comes from Jonathan. Jonathan says that his personal experience with the Libertarian Party has been one where he found it difficult to become an active participant outside of donating financially. He says that his experience may not be unique. What can the party do in 2019 not only to encourage new members to join, but make it easier for them to feel like they can contribute other than just financially?
That's a great question, and that has historically been a problem in all political parties, and we're not immune to it. So what we're doing in 2019 is, one, we have the National Committee over this last term has identified that there are tons of libertarian activists out there who want to be helpful, who may have special skills. They may be an attorney like me, or they may be a cybersecurity expert, or they might have some particular skill in a particular area. They might be great at media relations. They might be an archivist. All of these skills are things that we can leverage that can be much more valuable than the money that they might have available to give to the party. And so what the National Committee has done is we've established more working subcommittees that have specific projects, things like developing a voting system to improve our conventions and make it easier for us to get the business of the party done, or preserving the history of the party, or engaging with youth and young activists to make sure that we are an even better fit for young voters. And those subcommittees, we have committed to going out to the entire membership and having an open call for applicants so that any activist who wants to get engaged with the party has an opportunity to do meaningful work that moves the party's goals down the field above and beyond just contributing as a member or a donor. The other thing that we're going to do in 2019 is really push hard on trying to significantly increase how many candidates are running for local and state office in those states that have state legislative elections in 2019. But a lot of local and municipal elections are in those odd years. And there's nothing more exciting for a libertarian than to be able to work on another libertarian's campaign or run for office themselves and go out there and actually send these ideas out into the world and bring new people in. And so we want there to be more opportunities for that in 2019. One of the things, as a small aside, the National Committee has some financial challenges coming out of 2018 because we spent a lot on some initiatives, and it was more than we brought in. But part of that is actually the success of running so many candidates for public office and so many high-profile, really good campaigns that we had candidates who were raising orders of magnitude more money than historically we've done. Typically in a race where a candidate would raise $500, instead they're raising $5,000. In a race where a candidate, might have raised $50,000 in the past, they're raising $500,000 or $400,000. If they're raising $5,000, it's $50,000. That kind of engagement from our libertarian activists and the libertarian community and a lot of non-libertarians, that's where a lot of the energy goes to if you have candidates there to take advantage of it. So what I'm hoping in 2019 is both the opportunities to help do the business of the party by expanding how the work goes and what subcommittees are available and working groups, as well as having more campaigns and candidates that people can support, will really help people get more engaged. And I hope, Jonathan, that you're able to find a campaign to work on where you live?
This question comes from Paul. He lives in Maryland, and he notes that it's a heavily Democrat-leaning state with 65% of the registered voters as Democratic voters. And he said that fact alone was reflected in the midterm election where only 1% of the Maryland voters voted Libertarian. What are the strategic plans that are in place now to educate the public and the state-level voters that a third or fourth party option is viable?
So thank you for that question. As the former state chair of the Libertarian Party in Maryland, Maryland is very dear to my heart. So I actually ran into, this goes back well over a decade, I ran into a Republican activist at Taws, which is a picnic that they have down on the Eastern Shore with a lot of crabs and a lot of beer. And we were running a gubernatorial candidate for the first time in that you had a non-Republican or Democrat for, I think, 50 years, Spear Lancaster, back in 2002. And this guy comes up to me and he says, "What are you libertarians doing running a gubernatorial candidate? We're trying to make Maryland a two-party state." And I looked him right in the eye and I said, "We are too. You're not one of them." Because in Maryland, like Massachusetts, like Hawaii, the Republicans are very limited in what they're able to do. They occasionally get a governor, but other than that, they're not very organizationally strong. And so that's an opportunity to go out and run more candidates than the non-dominant party and actually replace them as the second party. And you saw that, what I think the Maryland party may want to do is look just a little bit south at what happened in the District of Columbia in 2018, where the D.C. Libertarian Party ran a full slate for district-wide offices, and their candidates did significantly better and outperformed the D.C. Republicans across the board. And so I think it's not so much about, it's not so much an education thing as just showing up and working harder in more places than the Republicans do. What I found is that these non-dominant parties, and you can flip it in other states. In Texas, the Democrats are the ones who we would probably displace in places like Texas or Utah or Wyoming. There are some states in this country where the non-dominant old party has maybe 4 or 5 seats in the state legislature. And so a concerted effort to go in and work harder and show up more on those issues that may have had people register Republican or Democrat, even though it's a deep minority. What you need to do is look at it as you're trying to become the dominant minority party in the state as a first step. So if you do better on the issues that the non-dominant party has historically been good at and has taken advantage of, as well as being good on a few issues that the dominant party is good on, which is a great opportunity for libertarians because we have issues that we agree with lots of people from across the political spectrum on, you can look like a more serious party than, the Republicans in a state like Maryland or the Democrats in a state like, Wyoming.
Okay, the next question is pretty detailed about ballot access, and we did receive some more in-depth questions about ballot access. We'll get to those individually. Nick, would you please speak in broad brushstrokes about ballot access for 2019 and 2020? And for some of our callers that are new to ballot access, could you please give a little bit of information on why it's so important we have ballot access?
All right, so here's the thing that's different about the Libertarian Party, that's different from the entire broad libertarian movement. We are the only political organization in the libertarian movement. We're the only people who go out and contest elections. Your Catos, your Mises, all of your think tanks, that's not what they do. That's what we do. You can only do that if you're on the ballot. And once you're on the ballot and once you're on people's mind, then reporters and voters pay attention to you in a way that they don't do if you're not available as a choice. The Republicans and the Democrats know this, so they cheat with both hands and they work together to try and make it extra hard for us to get on the ballot. One of the great examples right now is Illinois. In Illinois, the Libertarian Party has to turn in 25,000 valid signatures to get our candidates on the ballot for a general election. The Republicans and the Democrats only have to turn in, I think, a little less than 5,000 signatures. And that's what Republicans and Democrats think is, quote, fair. They want the hurdles to be extra high for us. They want us to basically have to run a 10K before we get to the starting line for the marathon, and then they point and laugh and go, ha, 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 you didn't run that race really fast. So what we've been trying to do is be very strategic about ballot access. We know that they don't want us to be out there making them look bad. So we're trying to make sure that we're there everywhere around the country. And we are on track again, I think, with some good fundraising and some strategic choices to have 50 state plus the District of Columbia ballot access again in the 2020 general election for president, which would be one of the first times, maybe the first time that anyone's done that back-to-back as a non-Republican or Democratic party. We also engage in strategic lobbying. One of the things we did in Oklahoma to get ballot access before 2016 was retain a lobbyist to go and make sure that a bill that made it easier for us actually made it to the governor's desk and got signed. We litigate over this stuff. We try and strike down laws like we got a settlement with the Secretary of State of Maine where they had a very discriminatory ballot access regime, and we're probably going to go back to court in Maine to keep making it better. We've been trying to get states like California, Nevada, Arizona, and Maryland, for example, states where the voter registration, partisan voter registration, can allow you to retain ballot access. So every year you don't have to get a certain vote percentage so that if you have a bad year, you don't lose it and go back to square one. We're trying to be very strategic with ballot access, and one of the things that has done is we are now in the best ballot access picture we've been in a long time. One of the things that is frustrating and challenging, though, is there are some states where we get heartbreakingly close. Heartbreakingly. Most recently, Arkansas. They needed 3% for their gubernatorial candidate in order to retain ballot access this year, and they got, I think their gubernatorial candidate did the best of almost anyone in a three-way race around the country. He got 2.94 or 2.95%. So just horrible. And so now they have to collect another 10,000 signatures in order to get the party back on the ballot for 2020. And right now, with the budget we just passed, that money is not there for us to do it in 2019, even though that would be the most strategically responsible way to do it because it's cheaper to get it in 2019. So my hope is that with some strong fundraising and some people who really want to make that project happen, we can put that back into the budget and do those things to make sure that we're there and we're out fighting in the arena. That's what ballot access really does, is it gives us the opportunity to fight. It gets us into the game, and then from there, our candidates and our activists and our state parties really can take off and build on it.
Good question from Jason. Jason identifies a branding issue among voters. He cites that there was a race in Texas where a Democrat ran against a Libertarian, a two-way race, and the Democrat won with 89% of the vote. He would like to know, what is the party doing to increase its brand awareness?
So we do a lot of things, and these are things that don't pay dividends right away. So you probably noticed over the last few years that with Wes Benedict, our former executive director, and people like Jess Mears and other people are getting engaged in ways to show off the Libertarian brand. We updated our logo and modernized it. We put out a lot more merchandise where people can see Libertarian out in the world and figure out what it's all about. and we run a lot more candidates than we used to run. Unfortunately, in places like Texas, they still have straight ticket voting down there. And so in a blue wave race like this last one was, there are a lot of Texans that just went in, checked Democrat, and walked back out of the voting booth. And there's not much you can do against that kind of overwhelming force. But it's still important for that candidate who got 11% of the vote to run, because those 11% of the people would not be represented without a Libertarian in the race. This was one of the things, in my race, I only got 10% in a four-way race for mayor. But the way I look at it, a supporter actually told me this. He said, there are only about 3,000 people in Phoenix who were Libertarians who voted. I got over 40,000 votes, which means 37,000 non-Libertarians thought that the ideas that I was pushing and the agenda I had was something they wanted to vote for to run the fifth biggest city in the country. Those are the people we do it for. We do it for the 11% that this candidate, represented, not the 89% who just, went in and checked the box for Democrat. And we have to just keep coming back and keep building on it. One of the things that gives me heart when we get some bad election results, as we have, is our party is overall younger and more nimble and has some real future in front of it. And the two old parties are aging and they don't have new ideas and they're losing people right and left. So if we keep coming back and we keep showing people that we're not going to give up and we're going to stay consistent about what we're trying to do, I think that will help with a lot of the branding.
Nick, this is from the Libertarians in Ohio. A few of them have gathered at the Libertarian Party of Ohio headquarters, and they are requesting a shout-out from you.
Well, I will shout out to the Libertarian Party of Ohio. You guys are rock stars. Congratulations on getting back on the ballot in spite of Republican secretaries of state cheating with both hands. Sorry you're going to have to go back to court because the Republican Secretary of State wants to keep cheating. But I'm so impressed at the ability to not only execute a huge petition drive to come back the hard way when they denied you coming back with the strength of Gary Johnson's numbers, but then to run so many great candidates and give Ohioans the option that they really want, and then just keep on fighting, and then to take the time to listen to me natter on for nearly an hour. I mean, that's pretty impressive in and of itself. So keep going, Ohio. I don't want to offend the Michigan people, but I haven't heard any calls for a shout-out from the Michigan Libertarians. So take that for what it is.
And for clarification, they are at their headquarters right now, gathered and listening to you on this call. Here is a question from Pat. He is noting it's his observation that many campaigns, they don't realize why they get the results that they do. In order to address this, he says that we need to have real numbers showing why more voters do not vote for Libertarians. He would like to know, are there any plans to use discretionary funds for market research?
So this is a really good question, and I want to kind of break it down. It's important to know what your neighbors want if you want to be able to persuade them. If you don't know what's important to the voters in your community, then what you're going to do is you're going to go out and you're going to run a campaign talking about what's important to you, which is awesome if you were the voter. But you are not the voter. Libertarians, by our nature, are a minority in politics right now. So we need to figure out what other people want. We have in the past done polling and surveys to try and determine what brings people into libertarianism, what they like about us, what they don't like about us. I don't think it is a worthwhile use of discretionary funds at the national level to do very much research of that nature. And the reason is, to quote Tip O'Neill, all politics is local. What is important in Phoenix is different from what's important in Baltimore, which is different from what's important in Birmingham, which is different than what's important in Los Angeles. And so I think the best place to use that ability to find out what your neighbors like is in campaigns for public office. Those are the opportunities where you can double dip, essentially, because what you can do is you can have a candidate go out and either do phone polling to try and identify what's important to their constituents, or combine canvassing with asking questions of people at the door to collect data on what people say is important. And then you can take that information even after the campaign is over and go back to your state or county party and say, these are the things that people have said about why they would vote for the Libertarian candidate or why they wouldn't vote for the Libertarian candidate. And then we can, as a national party, serve as kind of a clearinghouse and aggregate that information back up from the state parties and the individual campaigns through our campaign support teams and through our state affiliates in order to get sort of a map of what the country looks like. You know, what are the most important issues for people in the 50 states, you know, and then we can kind of neck that down to regions and figure out what works in each place, because the beauty of libertarianism is it appeals to a lot of different people, and it's all about what feature do you lead with, what's going to be your hook. You know, there are places where the slogan, which has been used on bumper stickers before, pro-choice on everything, is super popular, and there are other places where that's like cutting your own throat. And knowing those regional and local differences is the most important thing.
We have some guests here at our National Party headquarters in Alexandria, Virginia, that would also like some shout-outs.
Is Ted one of them? Is Ted?
Is one
Ted's
of them.
there?
He's here.
I'm
He'd
so
like
glad
to
that
shout
Ted
out
was
to
able to make
Georgia.
it.
Yes, as well as Joe Bishop Henchman from D.C. and Jeff Lyons from Massachusetts. Would you mind saying hi to those gentlemen as well?
I would love to. Ted, thank you for running. If people don't know, Ted was our candidate in Georgia for governor. He did that even though he had come out of a fight with cancer, which he beat, thankfully, and is actually up in D.C. taking training at the Leadership Institute to learn to be a better candidate next time, and then took time out of his life to go to the national office to listen to me on the phone. So, kick-ass Ted. Joe Bishop Henchman was one of those D.C. candidates who exceeded his Republican opponent significantly, and in spite of him being wrong on a couple of things in the LNC meeting, the last couple of days, I still love him. And Jeff Lyons, well, he did a great job running Dan Fishman's campaign for auditor in Massachusetts. Dan Fishman, for those who don't know, managed to be the first Libertarian, as far as I'm aware, to get the endorsement of the Boston Globe for a statewide office in Massachusetts, which is a pretty damn big deal. So, and I appreciate all of them taking the time to listen to me, especially Jeff and Joe, who listened to me for 2 straight days this weekend.
We have about 10 more minutes left and many more questions to go through. Nick, how do you feel about doing some lightning questions?
Let's keep going. I'll start answering faster. How about that?
All right, sounds good. Jason would like to know, is there someone within the party reviewing congressional districts that are purple and ripe for Libertarians to get significant numbers?
Not really. Congress isn't where we're looking for strategic opportunities right now, because the numbers to kind of the ante to get into a congressional race is so high that we're not able to apply significant strategic resources to those purple districts. The other thing is, purple districts aren't really a significant opportunity because the purple districts attract so much money from the 2 old parties. What we use the purple districts for is we put a candidate up and we make them fight us in addition to their old party opponent, but they're really used to distract the old parties away from our candidates that we want to put strategic effort into. You know, what I like to see is states where they may have 2 or 3 targeted candidates they really, really, really want to win, But they run 20 or 30 candidates for that same level, whether it's state house or state senate, so that the old parties don't know where to fight back. This is it's very similar to war, and you have to be able to work strategically to win. But Congress, really, that's not where the opportunities are right now. I think we're at the state house and state senate level.
This question's from Todd. He notes that there's a lot of resources tied up amongst all of the liberty and libertarian organizations, such as the Cato Institute, the think tank, or the Free State Project in New Hampshire. How do we work together to use our resources to work to advance libertarians getting elected?
So the way I always put it is, the Libertarian Party is part of this movement, but we're the only ones who are running for office. Outside of the only exception to that, I have to give a little shout out because he's super helpful. Young Americans for Liberty under Cliff Maloney has started to actually engage in assisting candidates for electoral office. But outside of that one exception, for the most part, we're the only game in town during, the election cycle or running for office. And so we need to be friends with all the other people in the movement, but we need to be clear to people who would otherwise support think tanks or whatever that this is part of diversifying your political investment portfolio. You may put 80% of your money into educating people about the ideas, but you should probably put like 10 or 15% into actually putting candidates in their face to call to task those candidates from the old parties that are spending too much money on things they shouldn't be even doing with the government.
This question comes from Lauren. She would like to know, has the LP been a supporter of birth or midwifery advocacy groups? And are there any plans to reach out to these groups and support their causes?
So the LP has always supported bodily autonomy and the idea that you should make your own choices about health care, and what choice could be more personal than how you give birth to your own child. And there are still a lot of states that stop people from giving birth at home or at a birth center or with the assistance of midwife instead of going to the hospital. This is personal to me. We have 4 kids in the Sarwark household, and we have had, or at least attempted to have, every one of them at a birth center. We were lucky to live in Colorado and Arizona, where the laws have been reformed to allow us that option, which didn't work for everybody and, frankly, didn't work for us the whole time. One of our children was born in a hospital due to some complications. One of our children had to go to the hospital due to some complications after birth. My wife, Valerie, had to go to the hospital, even though we had a successful birth at a birth center. But that freedom to choose is very core to libertarianism. We have not put out a specific issue position or tried a specific campaign on birth rights, but it is something that I'm open to doing. And I think that, I would encourage Lauren and anyone else to whom this issue is core to contact their LNC representatives with their, willingness to try and support these lawsuits or do an initiative campaign or do some sort of social media outreach or, get libertarian speakers to go and speak to some of these groups and let them know that we're on their side. And I would cooperate with that in any way I can. It's something I do think is important. But that's the way it is with a lot of these issues that are very passionate for a small group of people but maybe aren't as widespread as we would like, is you need to take the initiative, and then we will do what we can to empower and help you, because we do believe in all rights for all people all the time. It's all your freedoms, whether or not, that's an important one for you or not. We still want you to be able to live your life the way you choose.
This question is from Andrew. He would like to know if the National Party has plans to help state chapters recruit quality candidates for municipal and state offices.
We absolutely do, and Andrew should contact Kara Schultz. It's CARA.SCHULZ @lp.org, or you can probably find her by just going to the party website. She is our point person for recruiting candidates, and she would love to help.
Here's another question from Andrew. What's the party's long-term plan for outreach to the post-millennial generation, aka Gen Z, which has been reported to be a libertarian-leaning generation?
Long-term, I think we just capture the entire post-millennial generation. In the short term, it's a matter of making sure that the people that are responsible for membership and outreach are tapped into and getting advice from people that have, a good finger on the pulse of that generation so that we're reaching them in channels that they are familiar with, we're speaking in language that they're comfortable with, and we're trying to make it be welcoming. If you give me the choice between having a party position or having some communication that upsets some people, who are 55 and older, but it's super attractive to people who are 18 and younger, I'm taking that every time because long-term that's going to build a strong party. We need to prioritize the future and not sort of give in to the old people who, maybe have kind of kept the party in a particular place. It's not such a big deal in the Libertarian Party because we're very tapped into our platform and what we believe, and that doesn't change based on generations or fashion. I see it more in not making the mistakes like the Democratic Party did, where, under the Clintons, they basically got rid of any young people or anyone else who wanted to try something new and sidelined them instead, kind of giving in to their older donor class when they said, these are the people we want to run the party and this is the direction we want to go. And it's worked out very badly for them. So I want to make sure that we're very open to trying new things to reach out to a new generation.
Let's do 2 more questions before we have to say good night. Here is a question from Andy. He notes that Adam Kokesh has said he will be running for president in 2020. Do you know of anyone else who is firmly committed to running as a libertarian for president of the United States in 2020?
So as of right now, people that I know have announced that they want to run for president as a libertarian in 2020 are Adam Kokesh, Arvin Vohra, Kim Ruff. I think that's all the ones I know of who have specifically said that they are going to run for president in 2020. There are a few more people who have kind of done the things that make it look like they're going to run. People like Bill Weld seem like they're laying groundwork where it would be an option. And then there are a few more people who have, contacted me privately to ask questions about what would one do and how do you do it. And those are people who I, as a matter of course, I try not to share the names of the people who ask me for advice on stuff like that until they're ready to be public.
And let's take this last question of the evening from Stephen. And I'm sorry we didn't get through a number of these questions. We will do our very best to respond to them off of the call. Stephen says that equality and freedom are contradictory values. Good intentions notwithstanding, to enforce equality is to take from one for the benefit of another. What can the party do in 2019 to better promote individual freedom in an age that demands equality?
So equality is one of those weird words that means different things to different people. And if you go back to read things like Rothbard's essay, Egalitarianism is a Revolt Against Nature, there are forms of equality that are very bad, like Harrison Bergeron, the short story, where you take away from those people who are more talented in order to make everybody equal. That's not the kind of equality that is healthy for society. It's not the kind of equality libertarians support. What we support is equality of opportunity, equality of how you stand before the law, where nobody is above or below any other human being, where we all have equal dignity. But we don't demand that the government make everyone equal in outcome. We just try and make sure that the playing field is level, the rules are, applied equally across the board, and there are as few of them as possible in order to allow the maximum amount of innovation and freedom. And I think that's the thing that we need to do, is we need to not only support freedom, but we need to talk about how freedom creates the right kind of equality, that equality of opportunity and treatment before the law, and actually leads to better outcomes across the board, even if the distribution of outcomes may be wider. Overall, in the aggregate, everybody does better in an open, free market. And that's the vision of a society that we're working for. That is what you get out of a world set free in our lifetime. And what we need to do is, it's not the party, it's people like you, Stephen. You're the most important libertarian you know, because you're the libertarian that your friends and your neighbors and your colleagues know. And you need to show them this vision of what it is that you see as a way that we can all do better in society, and help them understand what good equality looks like, and that comes from individual freedom. It doesn't detract from it. Am I still there?
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I was just talking and I was muted for a few minutes. Thank you so much.
That's funny.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on the call this evening. If you would like to become an official dues-paying member of the Libertarian Party, we'll send you a membership card. You can go to lp.org/join. Membership is $25 a year, and it supports all of the work that Nick has been talking about for the last hour. Thank you, everyone, for calling in. Nick, do you have any closing remarks before we end the call?
I want to say that it has been an honor to share this time with you tonight. This is the holiday season. It's a time for Thanksgiving and reflection. I want to thank all of you for supporting the party, for supporting individual candidates, for supporting the idea that there's something better that we can bring to American politics, where we focus not on what the government can do to control people, but what the government can do to get out of the way of people trying to make each other's lives better and engage in peaceful and voluntary interactions. And so I wish you all the best during the holidays and for a wonderful new year in 2019. There's a lot of stuff that we're going to get done, but I couldn't do it without all of you, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.